Good morning. My name is Captain Miola with the Mahwah Police Department. I am now the acting chief, and it's Monday morning, November 28th at 9 a.m. Tomorrow morning, I have a meeting that's scheduled for 11 o'clock. There's a protest that's going to be held that involves a organization called Occupy Downtown. They are essentially a group that is protesting how local merchants they feel are gouging local people in their stores. The leader of the organization is a man by the name of John Powers, and he will be at the meeting. There's also going to be many journalists that are in attendance because they feel that in previous protests that were held in other locations, that they were denied access and also mistreated during their covering of the protest. We figured that there'll be about 100 people who will participate in this protest, and it will begin with a march down Main Street and culminate in Balboa Park, where they will camp out for probably 3 or 4 days. In the past, there have been claims of police brutality at other police departments, so we're going to make sure that we address that as well. Now, right now, what I want to do is I want to prepare for that meeting because I want to be full of information when I meet with this group. I'm going to prepare for that meeting by contacting all the various departments within our city, and I'm going to invite them to a meeting today so that we can prepare. That includes members of Public Works so that they can provide barricades along the march route and also provide any extra garbage cans as well as porta-johns and maybe some auxiliary lighting along that route so that we have a safe setup there. I'm also going to make sure that our internal organization orders an elevated observation deck so that we can monitor the crowd from up top, and that provides us with a good perspective on what's going on. I'll also make sure that members of EMS and fire department are there so they can provide us direction on medical response if there's anybody that gets sick or injured during the protest. I'm going to notify local hospitals to make sure that they're prepared to treat anybody who's sick or injured, and that there's going to be an influx of people into our city, so that they should be prepared for that, as well as local merchants. I'm going to contact them and explain to them where the protest is going to be traveling and how they can best prepare themselves, making sure to protect their businesses and provide as much support to these organizations as they possibly can. I'm also going to confer with the commanders of all of our police units because I want to make sure that we cover any traffic considerations and how we can direct traffic away from the protest on the day of. I'm going to utilize our public information officer to take care of all that social media messaging and also interaction with the media, making sure that he's releasing information about any police business in strict compliance with Executive Order 69. I'm also going to confer with our SWAT commander because I want his tactical expertise in dealing with protests and large crowds and potential mass arrests. So I want his involvement as well. I'll use the rest of the command staff to determine if a total recall of the department is necessary or if just an increase in manpower should cover it. I'm also going to ask for mutual aid and also notify all of our surrounding jurisdictions in case we need their help, as well as the state police and the Regional Operations and Information Center, the ROC. I'm also going to make sure that before the event, I'm going to go over arrest protocols and how to process those that are arrested so that, if this is simply a write a summons and cut them loose type situation, we're going to make sure that we process them efficiently so that they're not delayed and we're not bogged down. I'm also going to confer with the municipal court to make sure that their input is heard about how to process these complaints and these summonses once they are generated, if they are generated. I'm going to make sure that I conduct a site survey and a drive-through of the route so that we can plan for any problem areas and identify any targets that can be possibly hardened prior to the event actually happening. If there's some delicate, items or things or places that would be a target of some anger or possibly an attack, we want to make sure that we prepare in advance for that. I'm going to make sure that we conduct a complete inventory of all of our equipment and ensure that we have enough flex cuffs in case we need to make mass arrests, helmets and goggles for the officers that are going to be actually providing security at the event, as well as riot gear and OC spray in the event that things go bad. I'm going to make sure that my lieutenants in patrol handle roll call training on protest response and also about the First Amendment rights of both the protesters and also the journalists. I'm going to contact Neptune PD and gather all the reports I can about their incident, making sure to focus on any claims of police brutality, find out if anything went down that we should be made aware of, and advise our officers that they should use the utmost control, because the use of force should never be considered routine. I'm going to notify our county prosecutor's office and the ROC, as I said before, so that we can get intelligence on this Occupy Downtown group and identify any potential problem protesters or any suspects that can be affiliated with this. And I'm going to make sure that I assign investigators to do a thorough investigation on all of those individuals so that we're prepared in the event that they're part of this protest. I'm going to assign plainclothes detectives to mix into the crowds so that we can get up-to-the-minute developments as it pertains to the mood of the crowd and maybe any planned events that they didn't tell us about during our meeting. I'm going to discuss the use of the ICS protocol. Now, what the ICS protocol is going to do, it's going to provide us with additional resources, more resources than we would normally have access to, as well as improved communications through the use of common terminology and a unity of command for all the resources. I'm also going to identify a staging area because we're going to be having a lot of extra resources coming our way. So I'll make sure that it's large enough to receive those resources and assign a lieutenant to that location to handle logistics. I'll make sure that there's a safety lane between the staging area and the inner perimeter, so that in case we do need that extra response, it can happen quickly and without obstacle. I'll also make sure that we use barricades to set up an inner perimeter and an outer perimeter in the park location. The inner perimeter will basically allow essential employees and officers to work the scene, while the outer perimeter will provide a buffer zone between the public and the protest area. I will make sure to notify our county terrorism coordinator and make a suspicious incident report on CT Watch both in advance and then afterwards, so that we can follow up with that and provide the best information to that group that we can. I'm going to assign officers on a 24 hours, 7-day-a-week basis in the park so we can maintain security at the park and make sure that we always have up-to-date information on any changing developments. I'm going to provide relief to those officers, since this looks to be a long-term event, maybe 3 or 4 days or longer. Make sure that they have relief. Now, at the 11 o'clock meeting with Mr. Powers and the journalists, I'm going to invite some local politicians because I'd like to get their input as well and have them, chime in with their thoughts. And I'm going to attempt to gain trust from both sides. I'm going to clearly state what the department policy is on peaceful protesting and guidelines that must be followed. I'm going to provide them with a copy of our department policy on protesting, on the use of force, and also about media access, so that we're all, informed up front on what should go down. I'm going to make sure that I explain that, what areas both the protesters and the media will have access to, and I will designate a specific area for that media so that they know that they can get the information that they need in order to do their jobs. I'm going to also set an expectation on how long this protest should last. I mean, ideally, it won't last, 4 months. If it lasts 3 or 4 days and we're prepared for that, that's great. But if it's going to go longer, we need to know that, and we need their cooperation. I'm going to provide contact phone numbers and a police liaison name so that they can interact, both the journalists and the protesters, so they can interact on a 24-hour basis with the liaison, both prior to the event and during the event. So if they have some issues that are coming up, they have somebody that they can contact and get answers. I'll make sure that that person is assigned to the command post with me. Now, when I establish the command post, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have an officer assigned as a scribe and 2 officers assigned for communications. One will handle radio communications, the other handle telephone communications, which will allow me to focus at the task at hand. I'll make sure the command post is upwind in the event that we ever have to introduce any OC spray or any other kind of chemical agent, that it's not affected by those substances. And I will also make sure that I invite all of the commanders of the various units and resources to the command post so that they can help me to make command decisions and also communicate those decisions out to their respective commands. I'm going to make sure that I give proper warning to the people at the meeting that illegal behavior will not be tolerated, but I will pledge to cooperate with them if things remain peaceful. Now, in the future, I'm going to make sure that after the event we do a critical incident critique, and we identify things like the number of protesters, the number of arrests, any problem areas, any training goals that we established after this, and any equipment wish list that we would like to have for a future event. I'm going to make sure that I publish that and provide copies of it to all the key stakeholders that are involved. Once the protests are concluded, I'm going to make sure that all units are returned back into service and all other resources are returned to their respective departments. I'm going to order all the officers that maybe have been affected by this incident in a negative way to attend post-traumatic stress debriefings between 24 and 72 hours. I'm going to make sure that I assign the training division to develop programs to address any of the deficiencies that we may have shown during this incident. I'm going to make sure to write thank you letters to all of our partners and assisting units, and I'm going to make sure that if there's any officers who distinguish themselves, that we commend them, and I'm going to do that in public. And if there's any officers that fell short of our expectations, I'll counsel them, but I'll do that in private. I'm going to hold a post-incident press conference and community meeting so that we can gauge the reaction from the citizens and gain their input. Now, in conclusion, I was tasked with developing and implementing a plan for an event that had many, many challenges. In order to meet those challenges, I utilized various resources, both from within the police department and also from outside of it. I also used my education, my training, and my experience to develop this comprehensive plan. While my initial focus was on the problem and how we should respond to it, afterwards I also looked at some collateral issues which may have contributed to the incident. The goal here is to cure the disease and not just treat the symptoms. Now, I also understand that anytime a large operation is executed, training must be considered. This is also stated in the Attorney General Guideline on Internal Affairs, where it pertains to officer misconduct. But the same applies for any kind of large-scale operation. Training must be considered. Therefore, I ordered a full review of the entire police department with the cooperation of the command staff so that we can identify any training goals that can address these deficiencies. I'm going to make sure that the training division develops and implements those programs, and I'm going to monitor them for their effectiveness. If I feel that anything needs to be changed, I'll make sure that I order those changes and also monitor them as well. The key here is to reevaluate continuously to make sure that department goals are being met. Lastly, I'd like to get the feedback of some of the key stakeholders that were involved here, because I'd like to see what their reaction was to my handling of this situation. I would like to say that I'm very proud of my team and the job that they did. I believe that my response is appropriate in scope and effective in reaching these goals. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I'd also like to ask you if there's a time that we can hold a follow-up meeting so we can go over some of the issues that we've talked about today. Thank you.